Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guest today is cartoonist John Rose. John, welcome back to Comic Culture.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me back, Terrence. I really appreciate it.
Now, John, you are the cartoonist behind one of the oldest strips in syndication, Barney Google and Snuffy Smith. And recently, we were emailing back and forth about the 100th anniversary year being put together in a digital edition by King's Features. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was actually King Features' idea to do a digital collection, and they asked me about if there was a certain year I wanted to do, and I suggested that one, and they were all for it. So basically, it's a collection of all of the Sunday comics in chronological order. And then I did a special storyline that year because it was Barney Google's 100th birthday. And I did about a 2.5 week storyline where Barney Google kind of gets lost in the comics trying to find his way back to Hoot and Holler for his birthday. So that was a real joy to have that whole story in the collection. I have some special artwork that I created for it. That was a lot of fun to do too. It's kind of my first foray of any kind into digital publishing. I'm an old guy and I like to feel the paper on my fingers when I turn the pages of a book, but I really enjoyed it. I've downloaded it to my phone and tablet, and it's real readable. I like the color. It came out really nice, I think.
Now, one of the things about a digital collection is that you don't have it on, that you can hold it in your hand. But again, you can do things that you can't do ordinarily. You can zoom in on a certain panel that you like, or you can see. You talked about that 2 weeks where Barney is walking through the comic strips, and I recall you sort of had him going into, he's at Camp Swampy, he's visiting the Bumsteads. When you're doing something like that, you can kind of zoom in and look at, your version of what Blondie would look like, or what, Beetle is going to look like. So as a cartoonist, when you get to play with somebody else's toys, how much fun is that?
That was a lot of fun for me because I think all the characters that I crossed over with were ones that I really enjoy. A lot of them that I've grown up reading, been a fan of my whole life. So it was fun to get to have Barney Google and sometimes Snuffy Smith interact with all those characters.
It's funny because I think of my life as a comic reader being really connected to the syndicated newspaper strips, and I was telling the folks on the show earlier that growing up on Long Island, we had two newspapers. We had Newsday, which had 3 pages of comics, and we had the New York Daily News, which had another 3 pages of comics. So, and a lot of times there was no overlaps. You got a lot of different strips that you could read back and forth. So, growing up and you're reading, let's say, Hagar the Horrible, or you're reading, Beetle Bailey, what are the strips that really inspire you to want to become a cartoonist?
When I was growing up as a young child, we lived in a small town. We had a small newspaper, but some of the comics that I really remember reading in that newspaper were Beetle Bailey and Blondie. And those were probably we didn't have Hager yet, but then as I got to be a teenager, we moved into the suburbs outside of Washington, D.C., and that comic section was more like the ones you described, where I think we had about 3.5 pages of comics, and it really opened my eyes to so many more comics that I hadn't seen because we didn't have the internet back then or anything you really had to research to find other comics or look at papers when you were on vacation. At that point, I was exposed to a lot more, like Hagar the Horrible, Hi and Lois. Mother Goose and Grimm was more when I went to college, but I really enjoyed Mother Goose and Grimm and Shoe. That was another one that really inspired me a lot.
I remember before Calvin and Hobbes hit the newspapers, there was a series of ads saying that this new strip was coming, Calvin and Hobbes coming, and there'd be like, a tease of the art and everything else. And so you got excited for 2 or 3 weeks when they ran this ad, and it would always be in a random spot, whether it was somewhere in the news section or the sports section or the classifieds. So it was kind of fun, and you kind of built up that excitement. So, you're talking about Shoe being the new strip when you're in college or something like that. What are the strips that, as they've come out, you've sort of been drawn to? Because I know that we see new strips from time to time, but, as a professional, what are the strips that you look at that are your contemporaries, but have come out after you've been working on Snuffy that make you say, wow, I got to step up my game?
Well, there's a lot of them that make me want to step up my game. There's a lot that I really like. Trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, I think Pearls Before Swine is funny. I like the biting sense of humor sometimes. Um, the uh, the new Heathcliff is fun. I like that. Actually, I grew up reading Heathcliff too. That was in my small town newspaper when I was very young. Um, but yeah, there's a lot. Even ones that are carried on now, like High and Lois and Beetle Bailey by Mort Walker's sons, inspire me every day. So yeah, I love a lot of comics, and I spend a lot of time, probably too much time, reading the comics on the different comic websites and then my local newspaper.
And as somebody who is a professional, and you've been a cartoonist for a few decades now, things have changed as far as newspapers go. It used to be, again, in the 80s, it was not uncommon for me to be able to read 3 pages of comics. And then we started to see that page count shrink to now it's a 2-page spread, and they started shrinking them so they could fit more on there. But then they stopped shrinking them, and they just started eliminating them. So as the media landscape changes, how are you sort of using the digital delivery to keep Snuffy in the public eye?
It is kind of different because, like I said, I like the paper, feeling of the paper in my hands, but I definitely have gotten used to reading the comics online. Um, I do that a lot. But then, for example, now with the comic strip, uh, we're not in the Washington Post print edition, but they have an online edition of comics in the Washington Post, and Barney Google and Snuffy Smith is in that. The same thing with USA Today. It's in the online section of USA Today comics. So it's just a different platform, and I kind of hope that. I mean, my hope is that comics will always be around, no matter what the platform is, whether it's your standard newspaper or online or some other way that we don't even know about yet.
Again, it's interesting because we're not so old that we don't know how to use those digital tools, but at the same time, we are old enough to appreciate that tactile feel of the board, the way the brush or the pen sort of draws that line of ink across the figure. Now, I know that you have a second-generation cartoonist working with you, your daughter, Sarah, who is a color artist who works on a few strips with you a year, but generally focusing around Lil Sparky. Can you tell us a little bit about the origin of Lil Sparky and how your daughter came to be involved?
Well, basically in 2020, I was trying to kind of think. She had graduated from college. She wanted to be a graphic designer, and she hadn't gotten the job that she wanted at this point. And I was trying to think of ways that maybe we could work together on something. And I was actually out mowing the grass, mowing the yard one evening, and it hit me that uh, Sparkplug, the horse, could have a grandson, and I would name him Lil Sparky. And I just started toying around with that idea, um, that that he would be a younger pony, a little racehorse, an aspiring racehorse. He wanted to be like his famous grandfather. And it just hit me maybe that Sarah could join me on that, since that's kind of a generational theme. And I asked her about it, and she was excited to join in. And we talked a lot about it. I talked about the characters, and went back and forth with her to get some input. And then so basically, Little Sparky is kind of his own little universe of a few other animal characters there with him. But um, we run special Little Sparky weeks. We have about 2 weeks a year, and they're all with that just feature those characters as the primary characters. And then Snuffy Smith or Barney Google might show up one day out of the week, but it's always a little Sparky, and there's a little duck friend of his, a chicken, a bunny rabbit, and then of course Sparkplug. Not only the 2 weeks that we do the comic strips, but also throughout the year he's kind of become popular with merchandise. So we've done T-shirts, and we did a Christmas ornament that was very popular, and I'm sure we'll do some other things with him too. I even have him on the cover of the digital book. Um, even though he wasn't even here in 2019. But now he was in a way, I guess. But yeah, so Sarah helps me with the coloring of this comic strip that those 2 weeks out of the year. Um, and I write it and draw it, and then she colors it. She has a good sense of color, and it's just fun to go back and forth and bounce ideas, and have somebody else to communicate with on that. And she enjoys it, I think, and I do too.
Well, as a reader, I enjoy it, and one of the
Thank you.
things that comes across, first off, the art it's that fun style, that cute style that you have, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Oh,
There's
thank you.
a
Thanks.
cuteness to Little Sparky, and then
Hmm.
I'm always thinking about the duck and the chicken that he's hanging out with, who always kind of point out some foible that he's got. But the one thing that
Right.
really comes through is you are having a lot of fun with that strip, with
Mhm.
that character. And imagine it's even more enjoyable because your daughter is involved and you get to share something with her. So, I mean, is it a little bit more special than just the standard Snuffy strip?
It's all special, but I guess it's just special in a different way. Um, uh, yeah, it's just a little bit of a change of pace for those 2 weeks out of the year. So it's fun. Yeah, I enjoy it, and it's one thing that is neat. These characters for those 2 weeks, the animal characters talk. And in the Snuffy Smith, Barney Google and Snuffy Smith standard comics, the animals don't talk. So that is a fun element too.
You know, I did just think about it. I'm hoping that Snuffy never sees the chicken that hangs out with little Sparky. That
That's
would
right.
make me a little nervous. Um, and I will say, I would have normally worn my little Sparky T-shirt that I wear on occasion, but I was interviewing some folks who were doing a podcast about Heathcliff today, so I'm wearing my Jimmy shirt. Um,
Okay.
so I
Okay.
hope
Well,
you're
that's
not
fine.
offended.
No, I'm not. I thank you for wearing it. I see you wear it sometimes on the show, and I really appreciate it.
So when it comes to this secondary merchandise, is this something that the syndicate comes up to you and says, we'd really like to do a T-shirt or a Christmas ornament, or is this something where you go to them and say, I think this would be a great idea?
I think actually the we did T-shirts first, and I think that was my idea when at that point, and they did really well. And then somebody at the syndicate came up with the idea of doing Christmas ornaments and or just holiday ornaments, and I wanted to participate, and they said, hey, why don't you start by doing Lil Sparky? So if we do one a year, it's only been the last 2 years, but he was the first year. Trying to, I think I have it right here. And yeah, if I can hold him up,
There you
I don't
go.
know if you can see that or not, but it's a glass ornament. I have him in a little festive uh, holiday Santa suit with a cup of hot cocoa, and just a fun little project to work on.
I guess it's different. You get to stretch some different muscles because designing an
Right.
ornament might have a different, work size than it would be for a
Hmm.
strip, whether it's a Sunday or a daily. So, is this something where you have to, sort of learn how it's going to be put together so that you can present the art the right way?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I did like several different character designs for the ornaments, and then ended up choosing the one I liked the best. And I've always liked merchandise, so it's fun to get to do some merchandise art. Like I've loved merchandise with cartoon characters on it. I have lots in my studio behind me, and it's neat to have some Snuffy Smith themed merchandise.
The artist studio is sort of a sacred space for the artist. It's also different for a lot of artists. And I've seen that a lot of the comic book artists tend to be in places where there's I don't want to say chaos, but a lot of chaos going on because it seems like they're always working to get that deadline. You know, they've got 22 pages a month that they have to sit over the drawing board and really force themselves to do. So their space is not as whimsical as, well, the space that you're in right now. So, as you are working on Snuffy Smith, how do these pieces sort of come about? Because I see you've got the giant cutout of Snuffy behind you, and I know it looks like you might have some curtains with Wheezy on it
I,
back there.
I
So,
do, yeah, yeah, I do
so
have some
where
curtains.
does this stuff come from?
Of course, some things I make myself, like the curtains. Those are hand drawn. I drew those, and then my wife made the curtains from the drawings. But then some things I find like older items on eBay. But a lot of things are just things I come across, and they're not all Snuffy Smith related. I mean, I've got like those old pogo figurines that used to be on was that Downy detergent, some kind of detergent or something. The all I have all the characters. Got some Bugs Bunny, a lot of Mickey Mouse stuff. So just different comics and characters that I admire. I feel like it kind of inspires me, or like you said, it makes you feel like you're entering kind of a whimsical space when you go to do your work.
And I would imagine too, because you are doing something designed to put a smile on somebody's face, maybe to get a chuckle on a Monday morning when they're getting ready for that first cup of coffee before they go off to work. I guess it helps you stay in that mindset of like, this is a great job. I don't have to go in the car
Yeah.
and travel for
Yeah.
45 minutes to go in an office and get yelled at. So,
Right. Right.
so again, this sense of whimsy, I guess that sort of helps you stay in the mood.
Yeah, I think you're right. I feel like it does, and I'm lucky that my wife is patient with that and lets me decorate this little section of our house that way.
And you mentioned the Pogo figurine, and I'm thinking back to those
Mhm.
comics that were so influential but aren't there anymore. And I'm thinking of Peanuts. And recently, I think we had the 75th anniversary of the first printing of the very first Peanut strip. And you got to do, I guess, something for the Schultz Museum. So could you talk a little bit about that?
It was what was that? Charles Schultz's 100th birthday, I think, was back in, I believe it was in November. A lot of comic strip cartoonists were asked to create Charles Schultz or Peanuts themed comic strips for that day. I kind of have a unique opportunity because um, of the age of my comic strip and because Charles Schultz and his family were fans of Barney Google. Um, I think one of his relatives, I don't remember if it was an uncle or grandfather, somebody nicknamed him Sparky based on the spark plug character in our comic strip. So that was kind of the angle that I took with the theme of the strip that I came up with. And it was a joy to create that, letting Sparkplug see that, he was honored that Charles Schultz had the nickname based on his name. And then to have it collected by the Schultz Museum, and then I didn't know that they had them on display, but then another cartoonist friend of mine was actually there and took some pictures and let some other cartoonists know that he had seen their work on the walls, and that was quite an honor to be a part of that. And it's a beautiful museum. I've been to the museum one time, and it's a beautiful place if you haven't been and you have the opportunity to go.
There are those cartoonists that influence us greatly, and to be recognized, by the family that's just got to be
Yeah.
quite an ego boost, as you continue your
It
work.
was very touching. Yeah, it was very touching. I mean, I remember when the Snoopy was all themed in the space outfits when I was a little kid, and I had some of those. When he went to the moon, and so I've been a big fan of Peanuts my whole life, or almost my whole life, I guess.
Well, I make this comment a lot on the show, and I apologize to the viewers, but one of the things that I remember most fondly growing up was even before I could read, my mom would give me lunch, and she'd put me in front of the paper, and I could just look at the pictures, and I had no idea what the man with the funny hair was saying, but I knew his name was Dagwood, and just kind of
Right.
seemed, oh, he's running into the mailman again. That's funny. And Snoopy was one of those things because he had the Charles had the specials on TV. You could kind of get
Sure.
excited about it. Um, so I would imagine when you have a character with a cultural impact, Snuffy is going back over a century now. There have been a lot of different, I guess, variations of the character, and I know that there's some in foreign languages. So when you see Snuffy appearing in another country, how do you sort of react to maybe your work being translated and having no idea exactly what it's saying?
I don't know. It's a really neat experience to see the comic translated into other languages, and I'd seen it for years in Spanish, but then got the opportunity to be asked to work on every year. We have a comic book in Norway. It's actually now it's a digest. They put Hager and Popeye and Snuffy together in a digest form, and they sell that comic book every year around, I think it's in November before Christmas. So yeah, to see my strips, they're usually Sunday strips from years past that I'd done, but to see them translated and then they recolor them for this publication, It's really neat. It's inspirational. You never think about your work, you know, going beyond the U.S. and it's really neat to see it. And I think it helps. And I'm not as good at this probably as at all that as Fred Laswell was, but I always thought Fred was a master of the sight gag. Very few words and rely on the art for a lot of the joke in the comic strip, and I think that helps it too. I try to do that, but he was a master at it, so I think that helps. There's less words to translate. A lot of it's visual, more of a visual medium. So, but it's neat to see it in other languages.
You attend Heroes Con in Charlotte every year, and that's where
Yes.
we get to see each other in person.
Right.
So, as a syndicated cartoonist, it's a different experience for you than it is for somebody who might be working on, let's say, the Fantastic Four or Batman, where I guess, fans of Batman are a little bit more casual, I guess, and it's the newspaper strip fans who seem to be the more hardcore because they have to, seek you out. So when you go to a convention, how do you sort of interact with the fans and get that feedback and that lets you know that you're doing something that means a lot to a lot of people?
It's a lot of fun for me because, as a comic strip cartoonist, I work down in my studio by myself a lot. So I don't hear or have a lot of interaction with readers other than emails or messages or comments on my comic strip online. So to get out and be with the public is a joy for me. It's a lot of fun at Heroes Con, and I'm usually, and I think I am too as well this year. I'm next to Marcus Hamilton, who does Dennis the Menace. We kind of always joke because we say that you know a lot of parents and grandparents bring their kids to this Comic Con, and they go and meet all the big comic book guys and girls, and then the grandparents and the parents come over and see us, and that's fine with me.
And it's interesting too because having watched you at the table, you greet fans, you have some merch for
Sure.
sale. Now, do you do the sketching like you might get a Lee Weeks or a John Romita Jr. They're doing sketching all day, or are you just kind of there, just interacting and hanging out with your cartooning brethren?
I interact a lot, but then I'll do sketches of the Snuffy characters. Like I'll draw Snuffy a lot for people. Some of those characters. But no, I don't try to do Batman or any. Definitely not anything like Lee Week standards.
When we're talking about Snuffy, he's one of those characters that is instantly recognizable. So I'm wondering, as you are doing a strip every single day, I think you mentioned this before we started, that you're actually, we're in the middle of April right now. You're working on the Sunday strip for the last weekend in June. Is this to keep you so that you can have some free time if you needed to go on vacation for a couple of weeks, or is this just the normal operation for the syndicate?
Basically the normal operation, but I think I'm a little farther ahead than some folks. But then there are other people that I know that try to be a year ahead of time because then you can still be in the mood of the correct season of the year, but you're a year ahead. So I've never been able to get that far ahead. But that would be nice. But it is kind of fun, here like around Christmas time when you're trying to come up with Christmas gags, and it's like the late summer or very very early fall, but you have Christmas music playing or watching some Rankin Bass Christmas specials or Charlie Brown Christmas or something in August. But yeah, it's just something you get used to, and I like to be as far ahead as I can be.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, how long it takes you to work on a daily strip, just the art-wise, not the gag, but
Sure.
how long it takes you to work on that compared to a Sunday strip.
The daily comic strip takes me about 2 hours after I have the gag. I pencil it, and then I will take the pencil sketch and then enlarge that on my copier, and then I'll put that on a light table, and then draw on some Bristol board paper. I'll ink it. That's how I do where I do the inking, and so that takes about 2 hours to do a daily comic strip. Everything depends on the difficulty of the art, but Sunday is about like three dailies. I usually get a little more involved with the artwork on the Sunday because most daily comics, most of the time, I work within two panels. So it's fun to be able to stretch out and have a lot more panels on a Sunday, tell a little bit more of a story, have a little bit more space to do some artwork. So those, and then also have to color those. So with all that, that usually takes about 15 hours. And that's just on the, but the drawing, the inking and everything is the same. It helps my original art, I think, by doing it on the light table. It helps the original art look a little more clean.
15 hours is a long time, and it does show. The Sunday strips are the ones I guess we get to spend a little bit more time on. But speaking of time, we've run out of it. So John, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with me today.
I'm honored. Thank you very much for having me again, Terrence. Really an honor to be here.
I'd like to thank everyone at home for watching Comic Culture. We will see you again soon.